Fame, glamour, and a shadowed motive collide. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Share your listening location in the comments. I love seeing you all gather here. Settle in for the mystery. There's no gentler way to wreck a calm Tuesday at the Brownstone than with a famous actress on the stoop at 9 sharp, wearing a coat the color of wet cherries. I'd just finished the morning mail. The usual stack of bills, invitations Wolfe would refuse, and letters from people who wanted him to solve the riddle of their unhappy lives for a modest fee. Fritz was in the kitchen humming, and I was headed to my desk when the bell rang. I opened the door, and the street's grey light poured around her. She was tall and lean, balanced on heels that looked designed to insult sidewalks, and her hat was tilted forward in a way that said she didn't need to hide but enjoyed the gesture. Under the coat was a dress of red satin, too vivid for mourning. Her hair was black and glossy, her mouth careful, and her eyes had that stage-trained trick of seeing everything without staring. "Mr. Goodwin?" she asked. "Depends. If you're selling encyclopedias, I'm a plumber." "Lenora Vance. I need to see Nero Wolfe." "You can't live in New York and not know the name." She was on posters bigger than taxis, and the Sunday papers treated her romances like national policy. In person, she didn't bring any of that noise with her. Just cold air clinging to her sleeves and a handbag gripped in a bare hand. "Wolfe doesn't see anyone before 11, I told her. "The orchids get first crack at his attention." "I'll wait," she said, and walked past me as if she owned the foyer. Maybe I should have stopped her. Maybe I was curious, or maybe the way she moved suggested she'd already rehearsed this entrance. I shut the door and followed her into the front room. She didn't sit. She stood there, taking in the place without gawking like someone checking a set for flaws. "May I take your coat?" I asked. No. That meant she either intended to bolt or intended to stay armored. "So," I said, leaning against the desk, "what brings Lenora Vance to our humble address? Missing jewels, missing people, or missing sense?" Her mouth twitched. "Someone is trying to make me disappear. Professionally or bodily? Both, perhaps." She went to the window, not for a view, but for distance. "Last night after the show, I found a parcel in my dressing room. I was alone. I assumed it was flowers. And it wasn't. It was a notebook, old leather. In it were entries, names, dates, places. Beside some of them were amounts of money. There was also a photograph of a man. Alive? Dead, she said quietly. The man is Henry Talcott." The name rang a bell, a small-time producer who'd vanished 2 years ago with gossip that he'd run off to Havana. The police had filed it as voluntary disappearance. "He disappeared in March, 2 years ago," she went on. "The notebook lists a meeting that month at the Ormond Club. My name is there beside his." "You were at the Ormond Club?" "No, I never met Talcott anywhere. But the notebook makes it look as if I arranged something. Something that ended with him and that photograph. This morning I got a call. A man said he knows I have the book. He warned me not to go to the police, not to tell anyone, not to try to hide. Tonight he'll call again with a place. I'm to bring the notebook there. Alone." "Did he mention money?" "No. He asked for obedience." She turned toward me then, and for the first time her voice showed a scrape of fear. "If I go, I may not come back. If I don't go, by Friday my name will be on every front page next to the word murder. I need someone who can stop that before it starts." Wolfe loves a riddle, especially one that strolls into his house, but he likes certainty too. "He'll want more than a maybe," I said. "A firm corpse or a firm fact?" "I can give him a fact." She lowered her voice. "The notebook was left to force me to reopen the past. And the past has already found this house." I blinked. "Meaning what?" "When I arrived, the elevator was waiting downstairs. Your front door was unlocked, and there's a man in a grey car across the street who's been watching since I turned the corner. I went to the window. Half a block down, a sedan idled with a driver holding a newspaper too high and turning pages too slowly. I looked back at her. "You think you were followed here?" "I know I was. And I think the people who want that notebook are willing to disturb anything that stands between them and it. The brownstone is Wolfe's sanctuary. Disturbing it is like poking a sleeping bear." I headed for the elevator bell. "All right, Miss Vance. Don't move. I'm going to wake him up early and see if he feels like being annoyed for profit on this very chilly winter morning." The elevator complained on the way up, and I rode it with the feeling you get when you're about to poke a grizzly before his coffee. Wolfe's door was open. He was in the big chair with a book on orchids propped in one hand and a cup of chocolate in the other, looking as if the world had been arranged purely for his convenience. "Archie," he said, not lifting his eyes, "your footsteps suggest invasion." "Not invasion, a celebrity. Lenora Vance is downstairs in a coat the color of bad intentions." That made him look. Wolfe distrusts actors, but he distrusts surprises more. I gave him the quick version. Notebook left in her dressing room, photo of missing producer Henry Talcott inside, a caller ordering her to bring the book to some unknown place tonight, and a grey sedan loafing across the street as if it had bought a ticket. He set his cup down. "Bring her here. And the notebook. Fritz will wait. I will see her now." Back downstairs, Fritz was balancing a tray toward the dining room, and I told him to detour. He sniffed once, but obeyed. Lenora Vance was still standing in the front room, coat on, handbag clutched, eyes alert. I said Wolfe was ready. She didn't ask why he'd changed his habits. She moved like she'd already decided time was her enemy. Upstairs, Wolfe stayed seated, of course, but his gaze did the work of a man on his feet. He gestured to the red leather chair across from him. She sat after a heartbeat's hesitation, smoothing her skirt as if stage lights were on her. "Miss Vance," Wolfe said, "Mr. Goodwin reports that you have disturbed my house." "I regret the hour," she replied, "but I was told you prefer disturbances fresh." "By whom?" "By someone I don't trust." "Yet he was right about you." She opened her bag and produced the notebook, cracked leather, narrow pages thick with ink. I handed it over. Wolfe took it delicately. "Tell me precisely how you came by this," he said. She described the dressing room after last night's show, the parcel without a card, her shock at seeing Talcott's photo in the back pocket, and her name beside his in the entries. She had locked the book in her safe and tried to sleep. At 7, the phone rang. A man with a low, careful voice said he knew she had it, warned her off the police, and promised she'd be ruined by Friday if she didn't comply. Tonight he would call with a meeting place. She was to come alone. Wolfe listened with his usual stillness. When she finished, he opened the notebook and began turning pages, slowly, as though they were petals. "You say you never met Talcott. Yet here is an entry placing you with him at the Orman Club in Chicago, March 2 years ago." He tapped a line. "You were there." Her chin lifted. "There was a supper for the troupe. I attended. I don't recall Talcott." "Memory is frequently selective," Wolfe said. "Either you spoke with him briefly and forgot, or this notebook lies. We will discover which. Did the caller threaten bodily harm?" "He didn't need to. He said I would regret stubbornness." "Did you recognize the voice?" "No." "Then he is either the one who left this, or he has direct access to that person." Wolfe closed the book. "Why did you come to me instead of Inspector Kramer?" "Because the police see a name and a photograph and call it a case. I need logic before headlines." Wolfe's eyes were bored, but his mind was awake. "I do not work gratis. State your fee." She laid a check on the table. The number could have bought a small island. Wolfe neither glanced nor flinched. "Acceptable. Now you will return home. You will not attend any meeting. If he calls again, you will say only that you are consulting counsel and will respond tomorrow. Nothing more. Mr. Goodwin will be present to listen. Is that clear?" Yes. Good. Archie, before you escort her, investigate the grey sedan, learn who watches my door, and let him understand that he does so at cost. I couldn't help grinning. With pleasure. Fritz met us in the hall with the injured look of a man whose timetable had been mauled. Wolfe flicked a finger, and Fritz retreated, but I knew he was storing the grievance for later, to be served with sauce. As we crossed the front room, Lenora's posture stayed proud, yet her fingers fretted at her handbag clasp. That blend of steel and tremor told me this wasn't a stunt for publicity. Whatever game was starting, she was a queen being pushed by unseen hands, and she hated the square she was on right now. Badly. We rode down. At the threshold, Lenora Vance paused, eyes on mine. Do you think he can stop this? I've seen Wolfe stop worse, I said, including my tendency to argue. Let's get you home before your caller decides to improvise. Outside, the air had teeth. Lenora stepped onto the stoop, her red coat bright against the grey. The sedan she'd pointed out was still half a block down, engine idling. The driver was doing the newspaper pantomime again, but the paper now had a crease where his thumb had worried it too long. Your car? I asked. 2 blocks over. My driver is circling. Good. Walk casually. If he follows, I'll notice. If he doesn't, I'll still notice. She gave a short laugh that didn't travel far. We went down the steps and along the sidewalk. I didn't look back until we reached the corner. Then I checked a shop window. The grey sedan eased from the curb, slow as a cat, pretending it doesn't care. The driver kept a respectful distance, which meant he'd been taught manners by someone who wasn't gentle. I handed Lenora into a cab that had materialized right on cue. Go straight home, I told the driver. If anyone asks, you're taking her to Newark. Lenora leaned forward. Archie. Yeah? If he calls before you get there. He won't, not if he's smart. If he isn't, Wolfe will handle him. Keep your line open. She nodded once, and the cab slid off into traffic. I walked back toward the brownstone at a strolling pace that said I had nowhere to be. The sedan crept after the cab for maybe a dozen yards, then made a right. That was my invitation. I crossed the street, cut down the next block, and reached the corner in time to see the grey car paused at a red light. I stepped off the curb and planted myself beside the driver's window. He was mid-40s, clean-shaven, coat collar up, eyes flat with the patience you get from being paid to wait. He didn't startle, which meant he'd seen me coming or had trained himself never to show it. Morning, I said. He lowered the window an inch. Yeah? My boss wants to know why you're parked outside his house. If you're selling something, I can tell you now he doesn't buy. He stared ahead. Move along. Not till you answer. You get paid by the hour or by the nuisance. His jaw tightened. Private security. For whom? That's none of your business. It is when you're in my neighborhood on my curb. You got a name? He exhaled. Tell your boss I'm here to make sure nobody harms Miss Vance. That's touching. If you're her guardian angel, why didn't you say hello when she walked in? She didn't need to see me. Or you didn't want her to. I watched his hands, steady on wheel and gear shift. Start with who hired you. The light changed. He let it go another beat, then said, A man named Felix Rudd, theater investor. He pays for protection. Why today? Because a producer's been sniffing around her, because there were threats. He met my eyes. That's all I know. I'd heard of Rudd in passing. Big wallet, small smile. Where can I find him? You don't. Sure I do, if you're not lying. If you are lying, you'll find me instead. Give Felix my regards. He rolled forward, and I stepped back onto the curb. The newspaper on the seat was pristine and unread. Back inside, I went up to Wolfe's office. He was still with the notebook, a magnifier in one hand. Saul Panzer had arrived. His hat was on the table, and his long frame was folded into a chair quietly, as if he'd been there since dawn. Archie, Wolfe said, You have learned something. Name's Felix Rudd. According to our watcher, he hired private security to protect Miss Vance. Watcher claims there were threats involving some producer sniffing around. Saul's eyebrows rose a sliver. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Felix Rudd is not a philanthropist. No, but he might be infatuated, or possessive, or both. Wolfe turned a page. This notebook is not a diary, it is an account ledger. The handwriting is consistent throughout, except 4 entries made in different ink, perhaps added later. Talcott's name appears 15 times. Rudd's appears twice. So Rudd knew Talcott, or wished us to think so. Wolfe looked to Saul. You will locate Mr. Rudd and persuade him to visit here at 2 o'clock. Saul nodded once. Wolfe looked at me. You will go to Miss Vance's residence. Stay there. If the caller telephones, you will listen and report every syllable. Meanwhile, I will consult Inspector Kramer. I wondered, not for the first time, about the way Wolfe could sit in that chair and still pull the whole city toward him like a string. A notebook shows up, a voice makes threats, and suddenly actors and investors and cops were going to orbit our office on his schedule. He reached for the phone. I grabbed my coat, nodded to Saul, and headed for the elevator. The day had started with an actress in red, and by afternoon we'd have a theater shark in Wolfe's chair or a fresh mess to clean up before dinner was served. Lenora Vance lived the way columnists think actresses live. High ceilings, expensive quiet, and furniture placed like it had taken direction. The doorman waved me up without a question. She was in a sitting room facing the park, coat off, a cigarette unlit between her fingers because she'd promised Wolfe, with a look, that she'd keep her head clear. You're early, she said. Wolfe likes to be ahead of trouble. Any calls? None. She nodded at the phone on a side table. But I keep hearing it ring in my head. I took a chair with a view of the door and the phone. Tell me about Felix Rudd. Her mouth flattened. Felix finances plays. He's backed my last 3. He likes to think he discovered me, as if I were a mineral. He sends flowers, offers advice I don't ask for, and expects gratitude on demand. But he's never threatened me. Did Talcott? She hesitated. Henry Talcott wanted me for a film 2 years ago. I refused. In Chicago, after a troupe dinner at the Ormond Club, he cornered me. We argued. 5 minutes, maybe. He left angry. I forgot him. So you did meet him. Anyone else from that month who might connect you to him? A manager, a rival, an assistant? My dresser, Millie, quit last week. Said I was impossible. She's been with me for years. Beyond her, no one close. She rubbed her forehead. I only skimmed the notebook. I was afraid to look too long. Before I could push, the phone rang. Lenora froze, then lifted the receiver. I leaned in close enough to hear the other voice as a low blur. Hello? She said evenly. A pause. Yes, I have it. Longer pause. She glanced at me. I'm not going to the police. I'm consulting counsel. I'll respond tomorrow. The blur on the line sharpened into something harder. Her shoulders rose. No, I'm not alone. She tried for calm and missed by a shade. Tomorrow. She listened, went still, and the cigarette snapped in her fingers. You're mistaken, she said. It's safe. Another hiss of sound. Her eyes widened. If you touch him, I will... The line went dead. She set the receiver down like it was hot. Who's him? I asked. My brother. Her voice thinned. Daniel. He teaches music in Queens. The caller says he has Daniel. If I don't deliver the notebook tonight, he'll dump him in the river. What place? The old Lyceum Theater. Stage door. 10 o'clock. Alone. And he knew you weren't alone. She nodded. He said he could hear breathing. Which means either there's a bug here or watchers outside. I stood. Either way, we don't play by his rules. I'm calling Wolfe. I rang the brown stone. Wolfe answered on the second tone, impatient as usual. I gave him her account, word for word. You will remain there, he said. Do not telephone your brother. If the man is truthful, that may kill him. If he is not, it is still unwise. I will arrange surveillance at the Lyceum. We will observe how he behaves when his victim refuses to walk into his trap. Also, I want to search for bugs. Proceed. Damage nothing. I'll be gentle. I hung up. Lenora was pacing in short, angry lines. Daniel has nothing to do with this. Exactly why he's good leverage. But going alone to the Lyceum won't save him. It'll just give them another hostage. She stopped. I won't be a coward. Good. Be brave right here. That's the Wolfe way. I started in the sitting room, checking behind the phone, under tables, inside lamps. Nothing. In her bedroom, I saw a fresh splice on the cord of a bedside radio. I unplugged it, opened the back, and found a tiny transmitter blinking like a guilty eye. Lenora came in, saw it, and went pale. So they've been listening. Yeah. Which means they heard you say you had the notebook this morning. I never said that. Tone can say plenty. Don't worry. Now we know what they know, and that makes their next move rushed. People who rush make mistakes. Wolfe lives on mistakes. She stared at the device a moment, then looked up. What do we do until 10? We wait, we watch, and we make sure your brother doesn't get moved before Wolfe can set the hook. She drew a breath that shook and then steadied. Daniel always takes the 7:40 train home, she said. If they grabbed him today, it was on his walk from the station. I asked for his address, his school, his habits. She reeled them off, then caught herself. You're building a map. Wolfe is. I'm the pencil. I went to the window and parted the curtain an inch. 2 men on the far side of the street pretended to study a storefront. The gray sedan I'd spoken to sat nearby, but its driver was different. We're being watched. Her laugh had no humor. They think they're tightening the net. Let them. Nets work 2 ways, if you know where to cut. At 9:30, I had Lenora in her coat again, not because we were going to trot obediently to the Lyceum, but because I wanted her out of her apartment before the men across the street decided to practice locksmithing. I told her Wolfe would rather have her breathing than heroic, and we took the service elevator down to the garage, where her driver waited with the motor running. Drive us to 45th and 8th, I said. Take the long way. He nodded and pulled into traffic. I watched the mirror. The gray sedan eased out a minute later, and another car fell in behind it. The tail was clumsy. They were used to her going places alone. We looped through Midtown, crossed a couple of avenues, doubled back, and by the time we reached the corner I'd asked for, our shadows were 2 blocks behind and irritated. I had the driver park beside a loading dock. We got out and walked into the alley as if we belonged there. Halfway down, I tapped a metal door marked Employees Only. A man opened it on a crack, saw me, and opened it wider. That you, Archie? Saul Panzer said. He was in an overcoat and looked as if he'd been born in alleys. Mr. Wolfe wanted you brought here if possible. Possible enough. You got a line on Daniel Vance? Working on it. Kramer has a patrol car near his school and a man at his apartment. Nothing yet. We're waiting on a trace from the call. Good. Lenora, this is Saul. He can find a needle in a snowbank. Saul, keep her out of sight till I call. Lenora started to protest, but Saul's calm stopped her. Miss Vance, you're safer with me than with your own furniture. Come inside. She went with him, stiff but willing. I headed back toward the street alone. The tails had parked where they could see the curb. They watched me emerge without her and got that confusion men get when the script changes. One of them lifted a phone. I crossed to a pay phone, dialed the brownstone, and got Wolfe. I reported the bug, the threat, and my detour. He listened, then said, Felix Rudd is here. Great. How's his mood? Repellent. He denies sending watchers to my house and claims his security works solely by his benevolence. He also denies knowing Talcott, except superficially. Except his name is in the notebook. Indeed. Return at once. We will review the notebook together with his assistance. I took a cab to the brownstone. When I stepped into the office, the temperature dropped a degree. Rudd was sprawled in the red leather chair. He was broad, eyes that never quite landed on yours unless they were pricing you. His hair was silver at the temples, his tie perfect, and his impatience thick. "Ah," he said when I came in. "The errand boy." Wolfe didn't look up. "Mr. Goodwin is my associate. You will address him properly, or you will leave." Rudd gave a short laugh. How very theatrical. "You hired men to watch my door," Wolfe said. "I hired men to watch Lenora Vance. She's under threat, and I am a friend. A friend who placed a listening device in her bedroom radio." His eyelids flickered. "What?" Wolfe slid the notebook across the table to me. "Read aloud the entry of March 17th. I found it. Ormond Club, Chicago. Talcott, L. Vance. Rudd paid remainder. Note, actress resistant. Use brother. Silence hit the room like a shut window. Rudd's face went slack for a beat, then hardened. "That's a forgery. I never wrote that." "No," Wolfe said. "The hand is not yours, but the phrasing is too apt to be random. You did pay Talcott in Chicago." Rudd lifted his chin. "I invest in people. Talcott came to me with a film slate. I gave him money. He vanished. End of story. Yet you continue to inquire after him," Wolfe said. "Your name appears again 6 months later beside an amount, and the word retrieval." Rudd's mouth tightened. "If I wanted my investment back, that's hardly criminal." "Criminality depends on method. Tell me about Miss Vance's brother." Rudd's eyes sharpened. "Keep him out of this. Daniel is irrelevant. Then why is he in this notebook?" Rudd stood, a flush climbing his neck. "Because someone wants to frighten her. Probably Trent Kells. He's been sniffing around her for months. Talcott was his partner. If Talcott's dead, Kells is shaking her down with an old story." "Trent Kells," Wolfe repeated. "The producer your watcher mentioned. You have supplied me with a suspect. Sit, Mr. Rudd. You will remain available." Rudd hesitated, then sat with the glare of a man forced to attend a play he hates. Wolfe looked at me. "Archie, locate Mr. Kells. Bring him here tomorrow morning. Tonight we will attend the Lyceum by proxy and see who arrives." I nodded. Somewhere Daniel Vance was either tied to a chair or drinking tea in Queens, and the difference mattered more than any notebook. By 10 o'clock, the city had turned colder and busier, which is New York's way of pretending it doesn't care about your private disasters. Wolfe stayed in his chair, but he had deployed the rest of us like chess pieces. Saul Panzer and I were to watch the stage door of the Lyceum. Inspector Kramer had loaned 2 plainclothesmen and a radio car around the corner. Felix Rudd was ordered to remain at the brownstone, handy if the caller tried another angle. Saul and I took a cab, got out a block away, and walked the rest. The Lyceum sat dark, its marquee dead, but its alley still open. A single lamp over the stage door made a puddle of light on wet pavement. Saul melted into a doorway opposite. I drifted down the block, hands in the pockets, looking like a man without a plan. At 10 sharp, a figure appeared at the far end of the alley. He kept to the wall, hat pulled low. Not Lenora. Too thick, too cautious. He stopped under the lamp, looked up and down, and set a small satchel on the ground. Behind him, a second shape slipped from a service door on the theater's flank. The newcomer came fast, grabbed the satchel, and spun the first man around. For a half-second, they were nose to nose. Then the newcomer's fist dropped like a mallet. The hatted man folded to the pavement. I started forward, then froze when a third person stepped into the lamp's circle, holding a handgun low and steady. He spoke quietly to the attacker, who nodded and dragged the unconscious man toward the service door. The gunman kept watching the alley mouth, waiting for the actress who wasn't coming. After a minute he cursed and followed the other two inside. The door shut. When it was clear they were gone, I went up to the spot. Only the satchel strap remained. It smelled of ink and old leather, a stand-in for the notebook. The messenger had been bait, the collector the muscle, and the gunman the traffic cop. Saul appeared beside me. "You see his face?" he murmured. "Not clean, medium build, dark coat. The collector was short, left ear bent. I've seen him somewhere. Kramer's men will go in. We should not." We backed off toward the corner. The two plainclothes men hustled through the door with more noise than I liked. 5 minutes later, they came out dragging the hatted man, groggy but alive. His hat had rolled off. He was young, mascara smudged under one eye. A hired kid, not a pro. Kramer arrived, scowling. "Where's the lady?" "Safe," I said. "Find anything?" "Empty rooms. They slipped out another way." He hauled the kid up. "Who hired you?" The kid blinked. "A guy at Moran's bar. Said drop the bag and wait. $20. "Describe him." "Tall, scar on his chin. Talked like he owned the joint." Kramer told his sergeant to get the kid into the radio car and started barking orders about canvassing the exits. While they churned, I walked the alley again, letting my shoes whisper on the wet bricks. Near the service door, a smear of reddish paint marked the wall at shoulder height, fresh enough to shine. It matched the color on the satchel strap, which meant the bag had been dragged against it on the way in. I scraped a flake off with my nail and pocketed it. Small things like that are the crumbs Wolfe follows when the loaf is hidden. On the ride back, Saul said little, but his silence wasn't empty. "They wanted a witness," he finally noted. "A public snatch, so she'll believe her brother's in danger." "Or so she'll believe they're desperate," I said. "Either way, it's theater, and that makes them sloppy." Saul and I exchanged a look. Chin scar plus bent ear in my head made a picture start to form. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe waited with the notebook open and Rudd sulking on the sofa. I told him what happened in the alley, the fake drop, the snatch, and the kid's description. Wolfe steepled his fingers. "Our adversary expected treachery and prepared to seize the book by force. Therefore, the brother threat was genuine or intended to be believed. We must locate Daniel Vance quickly." Rudd leaned forward. "I can help. I have people." "You have already helped too much," Wolfe said. "Archie, tomorrow you will go to Moran's bar and find the tall man with the chin scar. He is our next thread. Saul, you will locate Trent Kells and bring him here before noon. Inspector Kramer will keep his men at Mr. Vance's apartment and school." Kramer grunted and left. Fritz arrived with a tray, the smell of pork roast drifting in like sanity. Wolfe looked at it, then at me. "We eat. Afterward we think. The first act is over. Now we will see if he dares a second." I went to the dining room, wondering where a music teacher might be hidden in a city that never stops building closets. Tonight. Morning came brittle and bright. Wolfe was already in the office when I brought up coffee, his face set in the special displeasure that means he's been thinking without results. Rudd had been ordered away at midnight, and the house felt cleaner for it. "Archie," Wolfe said, "the man with the scar, you will proceed." I had planned a pleasant stroll to Moran's. "Anything else before I go sniffing bars at 9? He pushed a small envelope toward me. "The paint flake you collected has been examined. It is theatrical scenic paint, used by only one supplier, Bannister Scenic on 11th Avenue. It suggests our adversary works with theater people. So our boys hang around stagehands, or employ them. Hasten." Moran's was a narrow pub off 9th, open early for folks who don't keep banker hours. The air smelled of beer and bleach. A couple of longshoremen nursed coffee with whiskey. The bartender, a woman with arms like carved oak, looked me over. "Too early for poetry," she said. "I'm no poet. I'm looking for a tall fellow with a chin scar who buys labor cheap." Her eyes flattened. "Lots of tall fellows. Lots of scars." I slid a bill onto the bar. "This one hired a kid last night to drop a satchel at the Lyceum. Kid got punched for his trouble. I dislike that sort of management." The bill vanished. "You a cop?" "Worse. I work for Nero Wolfe." That name nudged her memory. She jerked her chin toward the back. "You want Benny Rasp? Comes in after 10. Sit and you'll see him." I waited over black coffee, watching the door. 10:15, Benny Rasp came in like a man expecting applause. Tall enough, coat too good for Moran's, scar on his chin like a white comma. He nodded to the bartender and headed for a booth. I slid in opposite before he sat. "Benny, we need a word." His eyes iced. "Do I know you?" "Not yet." "Archie Goodwin, you hired a kid last night for a theater errand." "Who hired you?" He half rose, then saw my foot on the booth's lip. "Get out of my face." "I will right after you answer. The kid's in a cell. Kramer's asking questions. If you want that scar to stay lonely, cooperate." His jaw worked. "I did a favor for a guy who said he was with Miss Vance's people. Paid me to pass a message." "What guy?" "Short, left ear busted. Calls himself Louis. That's it." "Louis what?" He lifted his hands. "Never got a last name. Met him at Bannister Scenic a couple weeks ago. He said there was good money for small jobs." "What kind of jobs?" "Moving stuff. Dropping stuff. Watching doors. I don't ask why." "You've been watching Wolfe's door, too." He flinched. "Maybe. Louis said the big fat detective was nosy." "Where do I find him?" "At Kalo's Diner on 10th. Bannister crew eats there. Louis, too, when he shows." I let him go. On my way out, I saw a man at a corner table watching me over his cup. Medium build, dark coat, eyes too awake for morning, left ear bent. Louis, no question. I didn't walk to him. I stepped outside, strolled half a block, then turned. He was following, casual, but close. I ducked through a hardware store, came out the other side, crossed against the light, and headed for a cab stand. He closed the distance. When he was 5 feet back, I spun. "Louis?" He stopped, startled that I'd named him. "Wrong guy. No, you were at the Lyceum. You dragged a satchel across a wall. Theater paint doesn't keep secrets." His eyes darted. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Then come explain it to Wolfe." He measured space and bolted. I chased 2 steps, enough to keep him running, then let him go. A man who runs from Wolfe can be tracked by people with badges. At a payphone, I called Kramer. "Inspector, your bent-ear boy goes by Louis. He works with Bannister Scenic and hangs at Kalo's on 10th. He just ran when I said your name." Kramer growled thanks. I called the brownstone next. Wolfe answered, and I gave him Benny Rasp's story and Louis's trail. "Excellent," Wolfe said. "Return. Mr. Kells has arrived." I took a cab uptown with the sour satisfaction that comes from doing legwork while the mastermind sits in velvet comfort. By the time I stepped into the hall, the house had its Tuesday rhythm again. Fritz clattering in the kitchen, the scent of onions drifting up the stairs, and the elevator grumbling the way it does when it knows I'm bringing trouble. In the office, Saul was already there, leaning against the bookcase, and a new man occupied the red leather chair. He was sleek, 50-ish, with hair that had been trained to behave, a carnation in his lapel like a challenge, and eyes that smiled while they measured. Trent Kells looked as if he'd walked in to buy a show, not answer for a kidnapping. Kells stood when I entered, polite enough to be artificial. "Mr. Goodwin, I presume?" "Sit down," I said. Try not to rehearse." He sat, one leg crossed with easy arrogance. Wolfe regarded him with mild distaste. "Mr. Kells," Wolfe began, "you are acquainted with Henry Talcott." "Was," Kells said. "He had a gift for exciting people with projects that never existed. I assume his ghost is why I'm here. He is a photograph in a notebook, and a motive in a crime involving Miss Lenora Vance's brother." Kells blinked once. "Brother, I'm not in that play." "Then we will enlarge your role. You met Miss Vance in Chicago at the Ormond Club 2 years ago. Talcott was present. You afterwards quarreled with Talcott about her." Kells's smile thinned. "If you're collecting old gossip, you'll find a dozen men who quarreled with Henry." "You proposed a film to Miss Vance," Wolfe said. "When she refused, you were displeased. I don't kidnap music teachers over casting. Yet someone has kidnapped him, and your name appears in this book." Wolfe slid the notebook toward him. Kells scanned the page, then shook his head. "Not my hand, not Henry's. It reads like melodrama dreamed by an accountant. Felix Rudd's payment in Chicago is accurate, though. Henry chased Felix's money. I tried to warn him off." "Where would Talcott keep such a notebook?" Wolfe asked. "In his coat, in his safe, under his pillow. He called it insurance, kept notes on investors and stars, and liked owning the only map." "Copies?" "None I knew. Henry was vain and paranoid." "Who might steal it?" "Nobody, Gentle. He suspected his assistant Mavis Holt, or his fixer Lou Rasp. Short fellow, bent ear. He handled rough meetings." "Henry vanished after Chicago while hunting whoever took the ledger." I lifted my eyebrows. "Lou Rasp is still around." Kells looked at me sharply. "Then you know more than I do." Wolfe said, "You will remain in New York and available. If you attempt to leave, Inspector Kramer will detain you. You may go." Kells rose. "Am I to be offended?" "You may be offended outside," I told him. He left without another word. When the door shut, Wolfe turned to Saul. "Your opinion?" "He's slippery, but not stupid. If he's in, he's not the top," Saul said. Wolfe nodded. "The top is who benefits from the notebook and from Talcott's silence. We have 3 names recurring: Rudd, Kells, and Louis. Rudd is desperate to possess Vance. Kells is ambitious but not panicked. Louis is a tool. Therefore the hand is Rudd's, or someone using his money." "The bug points that way," I said. "Denial is cheap," Wolfe replied. "Talcott used the ledger to command investors and terrify performers. Someone stole it and arranged Talcott's disappearance. Now they wish to control Miss Vance by resurrecting it." The phone rang. I answered. Kramer's voice came through, gravelly and hurried. "We got your boy Louis at Kalo's diner. Found a key on him, locker at Penn Station. We're opening it now," I told Wolfe. His eyes closed for a beat. "Go there. Report." Saul came with me. At Penn Station the air was sour with iron and impatience. Kramer met us by the lockers, key already in hand. "You two just in time." He turned the key, yanked the door open, and a man slumped forward into his arms. Daniel Vance was alive, wrists taped, mouth gagged, eyes wide but steady. Kramer tore off the tape and he gulped air. "I'm a friend of your sister," I said. "You're safe." Daniel swallowed. "Where is she?" "Safe." "Who did this?" "2 men," he rasped. One called the other Louis. The second was tall, scar on his chin. They said I owed a debt I didn't understand. They kept asking where the notebook was. They said if Felix didn't get it back, everyone would burn. Felix. The name landed hard. Saul's eyes met mine, and I stepped to the pay booth and called the brownstone. Wolfe answered on the first ring. "Yes?" "Daniel's found," I said. "Alive. He says Louis and Benny grabbed him, and they kept repeating, quote, 'If Felix doesn't get it back, everyone will burn.'" There was a short silence, the kind that meant Wolfe was fitting a final piece without letting his fingers show. "Bring Mr. "Vance to the brownstone," he said at last. "Kramer may send a man with him. I want his statement in my office, and I want your return immediately." Kramer overheard and frowned, but he was too pleased with the recovery to argue. We wrapped Daniel in a spare coat and steered him toward the exit, away from the staring commuters. He walked shakily, more angry than broken. In the cab, he gripped the seat edge and asked me the same question 3 times. Whether Lenora was truly safe. I told him yes each time, and by the 3rd he started to believe it, which was progress. Saul said nothing, but his jaw was set. He was already thinking about how to put Felix Rudd in Wolfe's chair. Wolfe's office was fuller than usual by the time we got Daniel upstairs. Lenora was there already, sitting on the sofa with her hands clenched, Saul standing behind her. When she saw her brother, she rose fast, and they held each other a brief moment. Wolfe let it happen, watching with the detachment of a man who knows emotion is an exhibit, not a tool. When they separated, Lenora looked at Wolfe. "You found him." "I found the thread," Wolfe said. "Mr. Goodwin and Inspector Kramer pulled it." He gestured to the chair by his desk. "Mr. Vance, sit. Tell me what occurred." Daniel sat, face pale. He described the walk from the station, the van that stopped too close, the hands that hauled him in, the tape, the locker. He repeated the names he'd heard, Louis and Benny, and the phrase about Felix. He said there was another voice, older, on the phone once, giving directions. "They called him Mr. Rudd," Daniel finished. "They were scared of him." Lenora made a sound, half rage, half grief. Wolfe inclined his head. "Thank you. You have helped us more than you are meant to." He turned to me. "Archie, ask Fritz to prepare a room for Mr. Vance. He will stay here until we conclude." Daniel started to object. Lenora gripped his arm and shook her head. When I returned, Wolfe was on the phone with Kramer. He didn't lower his voice. "Inspector, I require Felix Rudd here at 4, with no chance to evade. If you must use handcuffs, do so." He listened, then said, "I will explain. Yes, I'm certain." He hung up. Lenora stared at him. "You think Felix did this?" "I think Felix Rudd is the hinge on which this case pivots. Whether he is the hand or the door remains to be seen." She walked to the table, eyes on the notebook. "He's obsessed, but he isn't violent." "Obsession is a solvent," Wolfe said. "It dissolves decency." At 4, Kramer arrived first, bulky as a wardrobe, and behind him came Felix Rudd, looking as if he'd been dragged from a board meeting. His tie was loosened, cheeks flushed. He saw Lenora and tried to move toward her, but Kramer's hand on his elbow stopped him. "Sit down, Rudd," Kramer said. "Wolfe's got questions." Rudd glared at Wolfe. "This is an outrage. You have no right to detain me." "Perhaps not," Wolfe said. "But I have the right to speak, and you will listen. You have employed Louis Rasp to perform tasks for you. You directed him to bug Miss Vance's apartment. You directed him to kidnap her brother last night. You also directed him, 2 years ago, to retrieve a ledger stolen from Henry Talcott. Am I incorrect?" Rudd's mouth opened, then closed. "You're insane." Wolfe slid the notebook toward him. "Mr. Vance has told us the kidnappers said, if Felix doesn't get it back, everyone will burn. That is not hired men inventing a name. It is servants terrified of their employer." Rudd's eyes flicked to Lenora, then away. "They used my name to frighten you. That's all." "Then why was Talcott frightened of you? Why did he vanish after taking your money in Chicago? Why is your name in his ledger beside the word retrieval?" Wolfe's voice stayed mild, with a steel edge. "Tell the truth, Mr. Rudd. You're not as clever as you imagine, and I am not as patient." Rudd breathed hard. "Henry Talcott was a thief. He took my funds for a film, then blackmailed me with that ledger. He said he'd ruin me unless I paid again. I refused. He disappeared. I didn't make him disappear." "But you sought the ledger." "Of course I did." It was poison. You hired Louis to find it. Rudd hesitated. Yes, I wanted it back. Not for myself, for Lenora. Henry had notes about her. I couldn't let that fall into the wrong hands. Lenora's laugh was bitter. So you broke into my home to protect me? I never broke in. I only watched. His face reddened. When the ledger resurfaced yesterday, Louis told me. He said someone was planting it to destroy you. I told him to get it before they could. He acted without orders with your brother. I swear it. Wolfe looked at Kramer. Inspector, note his admission. Or now, Mr. Rudd, who stole the ledger 2 years ago? Who demanded you retrieve it? Rudd licked his lips. Mavis Holt, Talcott's assistant. She came to me crying, said Henry was going to wreck her with the book, said she'd taken it to save herself. She wanted help. I paid her to bring it to me. She never did. Then Henry vanished. Wolfe's eyes gleamed. And Mavis Holt has recently become Miss Vance's dresser, using the name Millie. Lenora swayed. Millie. She quit last week. Exactly, Wolfe said. She planted the ledger in your dressing room, used your brother as leverage, and hoped to sell the book twice. Once to you in fear, once to Mr. Rudd in desperation. But she misjudged my interest in disturbances. Wolfe let what he had said hang in the air long enough for it to bruise. Lenora's face tightened, then went still. Daniel blinked as if waking in a new world. Rudd looked hunted and hopeful at once. Kramer stared at Wolfe as if waiting for the punchline that never comes. You mean Millie was Talcott's assistant, Lenora said. Mavis Holt, Wolfe replied. She stole Talcott's ledger, then had to silence him when he pursued her. She later secured employment with you under an alias, waited, and returned the ledger to your dressing room to coerce you into delivering it to her. The listening device, the staged exchange at the Lyceum, and the kidnapping of your brother were tools to force speed and obedience. Rudd sputtered. Mavis is a thief, maybe, but not a murderer. Cowardice can kill as surely as courage, Wolfe said. She needed Talcott gone to sell what she had stolen. Your own confession supplies her motive, and Mr. Vance's abduction supplies her present crime. Inspector, you now have a path. Kramer grunted. A path ain't a body. But I'll take it. Where is she? Near her habits, Wolfe said. She worked with Bannister Scenic. She eats at Kalo's, and she will be trying to reach you, Mr. Rudd. Before you reach her. Saul has already telephoned my directions to your men. Saul lowered the receiver. 2 squads are on their way to her apartment and the Scenic shop. Lenora turned on Rudd. You knew this woman. You brought her back into my life. I didn't recognize her, he said. She never delivered the book. I thought she'd disappeared with Talcott. You thought, Lenora said, and the word had teeth. Kramer hauled himself up. I'm taking Rudd in on the brother grab. Wolfe lifted a hand. If you do, you risk losing a witness. He hired criminals to retrieve property, an offense, but he did not order a kidnapping. Keep him under bond and under your eye. Use your judgment, Inspector, not your temper. Kramer glared, then nodded once, more at the logic than at Wolfe. Fine, you stay put, Rudd. 1 twitch and I'll staple you to my desk. He left. Rudd half rose toward Lenora, then thought better of it and sank back. Less than an hour later, the bell rang. Saul brought up a thin woman in a cheap coat, hair hastily colored, eyes flicking for exits. Lenora stiffened. Millie. Mavis Holt, Wolfe said civilly. Sit there. He pointed to a chair opposite him. She sat because Saul's hand on her shoulder made the alternative seem unwise. I don't know what this is, she began. You know exactly, Wolfe said. You stole Talcott's ledger. You extorted Felix Rudd. You planted the book with Miss Vance and, through Louis Rasp, kidnapped her brother to force delivery. Tell us where Henry Talcott is buried. Her chin lifted a fraction, then collapsed. Tears came, not graceful ones, but gulping, frightened ones. I didn't mean to kill him. He was drunk. He grabbed me at the Ormond service stairs. We fought. He slipped, hit his head. I panicked. Louis helped me get him out. We buried him by the rail yard outside Chicago. I kept the book to protect myself, then to pay for leaving him behind. That's all. Enough, Wolfe said. You will repeat that to Inspector Kramer. If you add one honest detail, it may save you years. The elevator returned with Kramer and 2 detectives. Saul opened the door. They took Mavis away while she cried her story into her coat. Lenora watched until the door shut, then let out a long breath that trembled at the end. Daniel came from the guest room, pale but steady. She really did it. She really did, Lenora said, and put a hand on his shoulder as if to prove he was still there. Wolfe regarded them with a softened impatience. You will both go home now. You will sleep. Tomorrow the lawyers and newspapers will make noise. None of that will improve the truth. Lenora faced him. You believed me before you knew me. I believed the evidence, Wolfe said, and I believe that people who trade in fear seldom invent their victims. You were useful to them. That made you innocent of their scheme. She nodded, a small, tired smile appearing. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. Archie. She and Daniel left together, their footsteps lighter than when they arrived. Fritz appeared with dinner. Wolfe inhaled, pleased in spite of himself. You were right about obsession, I said. Rudd nearly burned everyone trying to own the role of savior. Yes, Wolfe replied. The desire to possess his appetite in formal wear. It calls itself devotion while it consumes its object. Warm thought for pork roast. After dinner is precisely when one should remember it, he said. We ate. The brownstone settled back into its silence, and I decided that if actresses in red had to invade our mornings, at least this one left with her brother alive and our dining schedule still mostly intact for once. Anyway. By the next afternoon, the city was already chewing on the news, but the brownstone had the hush of a church after service. Kramer came and went, once to take Mavis Holt's statement and again to say Chicago was digging where she'd told them. Wolfe accepted the calls as if confirming dinner reservations, then returned to his chair and orchids, convinced the world is best managed at a distance. Lenora phoned at 3. Wolfe listened on the house line, said little, then hung up and looked at me. She is leaving for Philadelphia. The producers there will shelter her from the press. Good idea. New York reporters treat grief like matinee candy. She asked if Mr. Rudd will be prosecuted. Well, he will pay for employing ruffians. That is justice enough. Also, there is a certain moral punishment he cannot avoid. You mean watching her walk away without him? Wolfe blinked. Precisely. Desire, when thwarted, is more educational than any judge. Fritz brought tea and strudel. Wolfe took his with the solemnity of communion. I took mine with the solemnity of appetite. The house felt almost normal, which in our line is a dangerous luxury, so I wasn't surprised when the bell rang. Felix Rudd came in quietly. He looked smaller, as if the last day had scraped him to the bone. His suit was the same, but the shine was gone from his eyes. He asked to see Wolfe, and I sent him up. Rudd stood in the doorway a second, then entered and closed it behind him as if he wanted no witnesses. Wolfe waited, saying nothing. Silence is one of his cheaper tricks, and it works on people who are already fraying. I came to apologize, Rudd said finally, to you for dragging your house into this. To Miss Vance, though she won't see me. I thought I was helping. I was only hungry. Wolfe regarded him. Apology is a beginning. It is not restitution. I'll pay whatever fine comes. I'll cover her brother's expenses. You cannot repair what your appetite damaged. Tell me why you kept seeking Talcott after he vanished. Not what you said. Why the truth? Rudd's mouth pulled tight. If he was alive, he could reappear and ruin me. If he was dead, someone had the book. Either way, it controlled my life. I couldn't bear that. control, Wolfe murmured. You did not want to be free. You wanted to be master, even of your fear. Rudd flinched. Maybe. I don't know what I am now. You are a man who has seen the end of a path he mistook for love. Go home, Mr. Rudd. Pay your debts, then learn to eat less greedily. Rudd nodded once, eyes shiny, and left. When the door shut, I exhaled. That's as close to mercy as you get before dinner. Mercy must be rationed, Wolfe said, like good butter. Kramer called later with the grim satisfaction of a man who'd been right to be suspicious. The Chicago body was found where Mavis said, and the coroner's first glance matched her story. He wanted Wolfe's cooperation for paperwork and thanked him in the way a bear might thank a fence for breaking its fall. Wolfe accepted without savoring it. After he hung up, he sat staring at the orchid book, not reading. I knew that look. He was checking the case for splinters. You think she told it straight? I asked. Straight enough. Fear drove her, then greed. Neither is rare. He looked at me. But note the elegance of her plan. She did not rely on violence after Chicago. She relied on reputations, on implied scandal, on your city's hunger for a fallen star. A human being can be killed socially as efficiently as physically. Still took a guy's life? Yes, one death to buy 2 years of stolen safety. Then she spent it. Fritz announced dinner. We ate roast duck with apples. And for a while, the only mysteries were Fritz's sauce and why Wolfe pretends to dislike my table manners. Over coffee, Wolfe said, "What will the newspapers call this affair? Actress blackmailed, brother kidnapped, producer buried. They'll manage to miss the point in 6 different fonts." The point, Wolfe said, is that talent attracts wolves, and not all wolves are detectives. Miss Vance thought fame made her invulnerable. It made her valuable prey. Mr. Rudd thought wealth gave him the right to protect what he coveted. It gave him only the means to destroy it. I sipped my coffee. So the moral is, don't be famous, don't be rich, and don't hire a guy named Louis. The morale is to distinguish love from possession, Wolfe said. One honors the other's autonomy, the other wears it as jewelry. The difference is simple. Humans are not. I grinned. That'll look great on a poster. Maybe in red. He snorted, which for Wolfe is a laugh. The brownstone was quiet again. The orchids would get their hour tomorrow, and I figured the next disturbance could take a number because tonight the house had earned its silence.